Do you want to be a writer but have no idea where to begin? Well, hopefully this series of videos will give you a clearer understanding and even some practical knowledge. In the previous video, I talked about my own history and my decades of experience working in the industry. It should also inspire you to start writing today. Give that one a watch if you haven't already. In this video, I'll be taking you through the entire process of writing a professional script. This is Refracted World. TV was easier to talk about because when I was working in TV in the 90s and early noughties, I was writing them in Word. So I would know what subject we were talking about. Always factual entertainment. I didn't work in drama, unfortunately. One day, I still hold that hope. But yeah, so because I worked in factual TV, I would, let's say we're going to a car roadshow and we're talking about all these vintage cars, and the presenter will be talking about a DeLorean. Now, obviously, I first think of Back to the Future, and so I would put that into the script. So I would write a bit of a script and make it a bit humorous and put Back to the Future reference in there, maybe have a sweeping shot of the DeLorean with the Back to the Future music, that kind of thing. So when it came to TV scripts, when I wrote them 20 years ago, oh my goodness, 20 years ago, then it was very different to how it is now. But the ethos is still the same. If you are writing something for TV and it's light entertainment, which is the area I worked in, it still has to be entertaining. And so no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, if it's light entertainment, you need to make it light entertainment. I know that sounds redundant, but it's true. So yeah, when you're writing your scripts, inject a bit of fun in there, make them a bit different, make them exciting, so the viewer at home is watching it and is amused. When I worked in documentaries, it was completely different, and especially when you're talking about trauma or death or something like that, then you have to be more conscious of your audience and of the people you are with. And there was one show I worked on where we were in a hospice with children who had terminal cancer, and that was so difficult to work on because these children were amazing. And by the time the TV show went out, most of them were no longer with us. And that was really hard. I struggled with that show a lot. And there were a lot of tears from a lot of the crew because it was hard to work on. But it was also a really important story to share. And it was important to get their individual stories out there. So the script for that was obviously tailored to that. And it's important when you're working in any area in TV, it's important to know your subject really well, which is why research is the most important thing before you write your script, because you cannot go into anything without knowing what you're talking about. And the more research you do, the better the script will be and the easier your job will be. So when I worked with Barbara Windsor, she was amazing. And I don't know how old you are who was watching this, but Barbara Windsor was a British icon, and she only died a few years ago. It was heartbreaking, but I worked with her quite a few times, and every single time she was just fantastic. And I'd known Barbara Windsor from the Carry On movies, and I was a fan anyway. And at the time she had 2 autobiographies out. So I read both autobiographies and I made extensive notes. And when it came to, it was a show with Gloria Hunniford and she was interviewing her. And when it came to Gloria, I had to give the notes to Gloria and then she would ask the questions, and I formed some questions that Gloria could ask. So it wasn't a script per se, but my research went into how Gloria would ask those questions and what she would ask. And so I gave extensive notes, and their pages were really, really extensive, and I'd done a lot of homework. And Gloria was so impressed. I think I was only, I don't know how old I was still young, but she sent me a bottle of pink champagne for Christmas that year because I'd done such a great job on the show. And that's really nice. I was already getting paid for doing my job, but that validation because you've done a really good job is always nice. And so research is your number one priority at the beginning, and that goes for all forms of writing. No matter what you're writing, it doesn't matter if you're writing a fiction book about space in 3127. It doesn't matter, you still need to do your research. How can you do research on the future? easily, you do research on technology now and put it into practice what it would be like in 1,000 years' time or whatever. And if you're talking about a different planet, you need to do the research on the planet, what we know at the moment. And if you're going to do faster than light travel, you need to stick to the laws of physics, and so you need to do a lot of research in physics. This is just an example plucked from my head. And research is so important. And I've been a researcher all my adult life, because with my first job being in TV, we had to do research for everything, because you can't make a TV show without knowledge of what you're making. And so I am quite adept at research now. And that goes for my books. I wrote a science fiction book that's based in London, modern day, and so I did a lot of research. And the critics' reviews of that book were always, the amount of research that's gone into this is brilliant and really well. In fact, I use one of the quotes on the back of my book saying it's a well-researched book, because it's important that you put that research in. And I've known a lot of people who want to get into writing that just don't want to put the time into research. They just want to write. Here's some knowledge for you. Every writer just wants to write. That's all we want to do. We don't want to be bogged down with anything. We don't want to be having to write notes. We don't have to be doing plans or research. We don't want to do any of that. We have this idea in our head and we just want to put it on the page. But by doing that, you're likely not going to get a great story out of it. Because if you don't use knowledge of, whatever world you're creating, whether it's a romance set in the 1800s or it's a fantasy set in a made-up world that you've made up, you have to give it some kind of reality that all humans can relate to. I'm afraid to say that it can be laborious, but it can also be really fascinating. If you've watched any of my videos before this, I have talked about many different things, and it's been fascinating learning about history and technology and science. It's amazing. And then I get to write all my notes and then put it into my script and then present it to you in an understandable way. And the reason I'm doing the writing one now is because so many people have asked me, especially recently, how I got into writing. You need to have an idea of whatever you're going to write. Because, again, we all have these amazing thoughts in our heads, but transferring that to paper isn't easy. And let's say your idea is, I've got this great idea for, it's like a dream world where trees can talk and birds are evil. And okay, that's great. What's the story? What's the story with that? And so the idea has to, just a very brief beginning, middle, end. That should be your idea. And you'll get that from inspiration wherever you get inspiration from. So it could be from your dreams, it could be from having a walk, it could be when you go to bed at night or when you wake up, or a conversation you've had or something you read or something you watched. We gain inspiration every second of every day from whatever we're doing. I gain my most inspiration when I have a shower. I do my best thinking in my shower. Whatever I've been writing, if I get stuck on a certain problem, I will have a shower and I'll be able to clear it up. And I think because the shower is the only place I am not connected to the world digitally. And so I am totally separated from everything else and I can just think. And it's a great problem solver as well. So once you have your idea from your inspiration, do the research, and then can you start writing? Not quite. So you've done your prep work, you have a great idea, you've been inspired to write the beginning, middle and end, you've done some research, you made some notes. Can you start writing? Yes, but I would advise you not to do it yet. There is one more stage you can add to this, and it's called planning. And some people do extensive planning. Personally, I don't, because it bores me. I just want to start writing. So what I do is on 2 or 3 A4 pages, I will type out the main characters' names, their ages, locations, and then what's going to happen in the beginning, middle and end. Just a brief outline of each. Something I've just started doing in the past few years is starting an Excel worksheet, writing down all the character names, their ages, and what scene or chapter they appear in, and that helps a lot for reference, especially when you get deep into a story. For those who have watched video 1 in this series, you'll know that I'd been going through quite a few years of being in a dark slump, and it wasn't until December 2016 that I started to come out of that, and that's when I had the idea to write my first ever musical. And I was in Hyde Park at Winter Wonderland with Ken and my best friend, and I told them I was going to write this musical, and they looked at me as if I were an alien, because I'd done nothing for years, and then all of a sudden I announced I'm going to write a musical, something I'd never done before. And yet I was determined to do it. And so the following year, I looked at how to get funding. I applied to the Arts Council. I'd done all my research. I knew the beginning, middle and end, even though I didn't have a script. And they rejected it first time, but the second time, because they liked the idea, they said yes, and I had the funding. And so then I needed to write a script. And I knew I couldn't do it like I had done before in Word or in written on paper. And so I looked into different programs of how to write a professional script. And the one I chose is called Final Draft. It's not cheap, but it is industry standard. It's the one they use in Hollywood. It's the one a lot of the films that you've seen, they will have written it on Final Draft. And so you can spend more time just writing the story that you want without having to worry about the formatting or the character names or whatever else. And some knowledge is needed on how to write different things like changes on the stage or changes for camera movements and things like that. But it's really easy to learn, and it just makes it more enjoyable. Because when I used to write scripts in Word, it would take me ages just to format them all and then remember where everything goes, and then the formatting will go out, and it's just a pain. That just makes your life so much easier. And if you're writing with somebody else, it's really easy to share the program and share the document with someone else through Final Draft. So I really recommend Final Draft if you want to be a professional scriptwriter or screenplay writer. That's the program I use, and it's brilliant. And as I was writing a musical, I had to write songs. And that's not something I'd done since I was 15 at school. And I have a Roland synth behind me, which is what I wrote the musical on. And yeah, I came up with 10, 12 songs, something like that. And if you've never written a song before, or you can't play an instrument, don't worry, because I'm not the greatest pianist. But you will find people who can arrange the music for you. As long as you have what you want in your head or the notes that you want, you will find somebody who you can pay to hire to actually arrange the music professionally. And when it comes to actually writing a song, the way I look at it, it's like writing a poem. So if you know how to write a poem, you can probably write a song, and at least a musical song. And that's the way I went about it anyway. So, lots of rhyming words at the end of each sentence. As long as you've got rhythm in your head and you know the pacing, and everyone knows how songs go. And if you like musicals, you know how musicals go. And so you can piece them together quite easily. But if you can't do it, there are people you can hire to do it for you. So don't worry so much about that if you really want to do a musical. Although I will say, writing a musical was the most stressful thing I've ever done in my entire life, because I didn't just write it, I also directed it, and as the producer pulled out just before production, I was also the producer. I was working 12 to 18 hours a day for 7 months, and I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and that's not exaggerating. I was really stressed, and the finished product was brilliant, and it got great reviews, but my goodness, was it hard. So, if you are writer-director, don't be producer as well. I will never be all three again. I don't even know if I'd do a musical again, because it's hard enough doing a play. It's really difficult doing a musical. So, you have a play. Your first draft is finished, and if you're doing a musical, you also have songs. But you need people to read through what you've done and point out any mistakes if there are any, or any suggestions for what you could add. Don't feel like you can't do this, because it's a necessity. You need people to always read what you've written, because you do not have that impartial judgment. Because what you think is on the page is what you will see. You will miss spelling errors, you will miss grammatical errors, you will miss things that should be obvious. And by giving it to a wider selection of people, they'll be able to spot these things for you. and there will be things. No one is perfect. And that is a hard lesson to learn as a writer, because when I started, I believed everything I wrote was perfect because I was young and naive. And now I'm older and realize that everything I write is great. I am a good writer, but I am not perfect because no one is. And so as an author, I have an editor. And as a screenwriter or a playwright, I have people who will look at my work and tell me if there's any issues, which there always are. So yeah, you need to do that. Don't be precious about your work, and don't feel like it's a failure on you, because it's not. Because you have done the work putting it into, and all somebody is coming in and saying, actually, that could do with changing blah, 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 just to make it right. Because what you don't want is to publish a book that's unedited or put on a play that hasn't been looked at, because you need people to point out the errors before it gets to that stage. So yeah, don't feel like it's a failure on you, or people are having a go at you or trying to be nasty. That's not the case. They just want your work to shine as best it can do. So yeah, don't feel precious. I know that's hard. So your script's finished, it's finalized, it's printed out, you've been through the casting stages, you've got your entire cast, you've got a rehearsal rooms booked for the weeks before the performance, and you're in rehearsals, and still the script will probably change, because once you see your words being acted out by different people, you can see that things either work or don't work. And one of the first scenes I ever wrote for Blink of an Eye, I thought was absolutely perfect. It wasn't changed in the edit, and yet when I saw it on the stage, I knew it wasn't right, and so I changed it. And that's fine. So one of the songs had to be changed as well in rehearsal. Whatever works will work. And the good thing about being a scriptwriter instead of an author is the audience never get to see your actual words. They are heard through the actors. And so it doesn't matter if you have a comma in the wrong place, or one of the words is spelt incorrectly, or the actors have changed lines and put pencil marks in, because the audience never see it. And that's why being a scriptwriter is easier than being an author. Because as an author, once your book is published and it is in the hands of a reader, everything has to be 100% perfect. Because they will spot everything, because they're reading every single word, they are seeing every single piece of punctuation that you've ever put in there, and if anything's wrong, they will notice it. But an audience watching a play or a musical or a film, they don't see any of those. And so you can get away with a lot more. It also makes the writing process a lot faster for a script than it does for writing a book, because again, everything has to be perfect, and it will be checked and checked and checked and double checked. And even after 2 edits and you've been through so many revisions, there will still be mistakes in a book. The amount of times I've read through my own work and thought, why is that comma there? But it doesn't matter with a screenplay or a script. So at least you don't have to worry about that. And the script changed quite a few times when we were in rehearsal. I actually added a whole half a scene for one of the actors because it was suggested by the actor, oh, what if I did this? And I was like, yeah, that's brilliant, let's write it in. And all of that will evolve. So your play will evolve even more when you're in rehearsals. And it stops evolving the day of the first performance. And it's nerve-wracking. It's also beautiful and exciting. And I'd been an actor for the majority of my time in the theatre. I performed hundreds of times on stage. And so sitting in the audience and watching my words being acted out by someone else was a surreal experience. It was brilliant. And I didn't ever want to be in this show either. I always joked that if one of because there's 4 men and 1 woman, and I said I can take over any of the men if they're ill, but I can't take over the female part. But I actually didn't want to. I didn't write it for me. I wrote it because I really wanted to get this show out there, and I really wanted to direct it. And I knew I couldn't direct and star in it. The musical went really well, and I always planned to do a follow-up or a sequel to it, but then I got married, and then I wrote a book, and then 2020 happened, and then I wrote another book, and it wasn't until January 2022 when I knew what I wanted to do, and that was to write a sequel to Blink, 15 years later, this time taking just the main character as a one-man stage show, and I would be playing the part of Jake. And that's what I did. Unfortunately, I couldn't get funding this time because it was in Edinburgh, and I had to cut corners in a lot of places. So we didn't hire a director because I thought I could do it myself. I couldn't. Didn't have any lighting. I didn't have any music because we couldn't afford a tech. I couldn't afford a designer, so I did the design myself, which was interesting. And so all of these, and no marketing budget. So basically, it was just me talking on a stage for an hour, performing my show, which went down well. I mean, the audiences absolutely loved it, but I knew it could be better. And so the following year, I then had a director and a marketing budget and all the things I didn't have before. And so the following year, and I didn't take it to Edinburgh because it cost £6,000 to take it to Edinburgh Fringe. So I just performed it in London. And I already had my knowledge of working on the musical before, and I had final draft, so I could write the show, and any mistakes I had made in the past, I knew how to rectify them. And the show, the second time round, was actually really good. And I was nominated for an award, it got lots of 5-star reviews, and when I finished performing that in Colchester last year, I was happy with how it had gone, and I knew I didn't need to do it again. If you want to know more about the entire process, there are actually 2 podcasts called the Blink the Entire Journey, where I go into the ins and outs of everything. So you can listen to those if you want to know more. But from a writing point of view, it was a great experience for me. And I learned so much from writing the musical, I was able to put into this play, and I never stopped learning. And I think that's important for all of us. Never stop learning, never stop gaining new knowledge. I really hope this information has been useful to any aspiring screenwriters and playwrights. And just remember, your idea is yours alone, but you need to build a solid foundation to build your story on. So before you do anything else, make sure you know the beginning, the middle, and the end. Research what you need to research for that story, and make sure that that foundation is stable. Because the more references you can look at whilst writing, the easier that writing will be for you. Maybe write character bios, something I do, so you know about each character and their personalities. That might never go into the story, but it gives you an insight into who they are and what they want. And also, the Excel sheet is something I do now, but I didn't do it for years. But it is just useful as a quick reference to look at for the characters. And also, your story will be the better the more people who look at it and edit it for you, because you will always miss things when you look through it. Don't write something and then go straight to publishing it, or straight to sending to an agent, or straight to putting it on stage. Make sure that you have friends or writers or colleagues that can look through your work and suggest changes, because it will only ever make your story stronger. In the next episode, I'll be talking about how I wrote my books, the whole process, and going all the way through to publishing, and how I dealt with the aftermath from publishing. Because as a self-published author, you do everything, and it's a lot of work, and it's not easy. But it can be fun, and it can be extremely rewarding. So if you want to stick around for that episode, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And to help me out, because I'm still at the beginning of my YouTube journey, please like, comment, and share this video. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one.